anywhere else.
Cool.
There you go.
Okay, one more intro. I'm Tracy O'Connell. I'm a certified daring way facilitator. I'm also a radiologist. And I spend most of my time now doing coaching and talking about topics that come up in our lives that have been discussed by Brené Brown, but kind of tailoring them more along with other thought leaders about how we're going to show up in medicine during this time of COVID and the pandemic and all the uncertainty. Vulnerability is a challenging but necessary thing for all of us as healthcare professionals to experience. At the beginning of this talk today, we talked about getting permission to talk about difficult topics. And I think as we go on, something I've been really emphasizing lately is the importance of giving ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, permission to that the medical community is not going to give to us, that we're going to have to give to ourselves in order to care for ourselves and our own emotions. And so this talk is a lot about feeling our feelings and what that's like for doctors who haven't really, everyone's shared already some challenges about that. And I think we're humans, so of course we're not spared our feelings, but as professionals, I think we can all pretty much trace back to early instances where we were not encouraged to share our feelings in the medical setting. So the Brené tenet of show up, be seen, and live brave comes up a lot, and it's very powerful, those words, but I think right now in the current circumstances, especially to try to show up and be seen, live brave, what does that even mean? Like, how do we show up right now? How do we want to be seen now and going forward? And then what does it even mean to live brave? And I think it's really important, and I'm going to emphasize the importance of words in this, this presentation. So brave is something that's come up a lot lately for me, because I've been thinking about folks who are in medicine who have been called to serve in other areas outside of their discipline or go back to communities like the times in the intensive care unit that they have really traumatic memories from and never were really thought that they would be called to do this, and kind of the ethics and morals that come into us as physicians about what we have to do and what we have a choice about. And so some people say brave is being afraid and doing it anyway. And then there's the other notion of maybe being brave is saying, you know, that's not for me. And it's hard for, you know, I discussed this with my kids last night at the dinner table, because I thought, what do you think is more brave? Like, is it more brave to do something you don't want to do and be, you know, like ski down a mountain, and you want that feeling of like, this is going to be challenging, but I think I can do it, as opposed to like really being able to say, you know what, I'm not doing it. I don't feel comfortable. I want you to call the ski patrol. I'm going home. We're taking the ride down. And I think that both instances are brave. And I think that it really comes down to circumstances and feeling that you have a choice and some autonomy in how you're feeling. Because I think if you are deployed to go into a COVID unit without consent, you know, I've said this before, we're not Marines and we're not Secret Service. And so there's some moral and ethical dilemmas, but also just personal dilemmas of comfort. And I think if you're forced to do something sort of like peer pressure, it can really be traumatic. And so I think that one of the things that in the Daring Way community they've really been bracing for is the trauma that's going to come from all of this. And we've discussed it in our small groups here in the Coaching Alliance, but the ramifications of that are pretty significant. So I think it's important to wrestle with that. It's really sensitive little mouse here. So what's interesting too is that kind of the definition of vulnerability, and we've all talked about some of it here this early in the talk, but you know, before 2018, all of Brené's books talked about vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And I really struggle with that, because it was just like, what does that even mean? Like, vulnerability is uncertainty. Like, just these words alone, vulnerability is risk, vulnerability is emotional exposure. It never sat with me. And I would say that I really kind of rumbled with my own understanding of what vulnerability was for a long time. And then it was interesting because recently I read her book, Dare to Lead, which was published in October of 2018, really describing vulnerability as an emotion. Vulnerability is the emotion that we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And that for me was huge. It seems silly, but as someone who focuses on the intellectual, I really tried to think, what am I really, is this what I'm feeling? Like someone said earlier, Stacy, vulnerability, equating it with shame, and kind of what's the difference? Like it just gets messy. It gets messy to understand the vocabulary. And so it helped me a lot to think of vulnerability as an emotion. And certainly I think we are feeling a lot of these emotions right now of uncertainty of what the future holds, uncertainty about our own risk and how we're going to show up. And then what emotions are we going to be allowed to share and how will we cope with those as we move forward? And so it's interesting, some people think too of kind of the battlefield, like I was, Kara already mentioned being when we talk about patients being vulnerable, right? Like, oh, the elderly are particularly vulnerable during this time. And we think that that means they're at more risk. Their chance of getting harmed or death is greater than. And then there's the concept of the battle, the soldier going into the battle. Like I'm vulnerable because I don't have on my armor and I don't have my shield and I could get hurt. And so I've come up with kind of my own amalgam of what vulnerability means to me, which is the ability to be able to sit with and feel any emotion, similar to the soldier in the battlefield, with no armor, and endure it, sit with it, no matter how uncomfortable it gets, try to keep an open heart and have no control over the outcome. So kind of going in, doing my best, and being willing to sit and tolerate with that discomfort. So that again has become a personal evolution and kind of something that helps me when I'm trying to really get granular about what vulnerability means. And again, why does the definition matter? Why am I going on and on about the definition? It's because words matter. And it's going to become more clear as we talk about emotion that it's really important to be clear on what word we're using and what we're describing. And I know Libby's talked about this a lot with empathy work. And others, too, is that words matter and how we communicate with others, how we talk to ourselves. And so that's why I really wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the definition. Also, because if you're not clear on what you're thinking or feeling or what the definitions are, then you don't take action to try to make decisions or move forward. And so I think if we're not clear on what we're struggling with right now, then it's hard for us to know what to do. So that's what I'm hoping to provide a little bit more clarity today. So what are we confused about? Well, for the purposes of this talk, I think that we're confused about our feelings because there's a lot of ideas of what we should be feeling and what's okay to feel. And then we have a lot of feelings about our feelings. That's already been demonstrated. Some of you mentioned that, I knew that it was okay to feel this way and I felt bad if I felt this way. People are feeling right now, I should. It's that kind of conflict between how I should be feeling versus how I'm really feeling and not even having the words to describe how I'm really feeling. So that's where I feel like we're confused. And then in medicine, this idea of the intellectual versus the emotional. We have really spent all of our lives training our intellectual mind. If you think of the body and, the mind as if you think of life as a pie, and we've really got a giant intellectual piece of pie, and we've got a really not very skilled emotional slice of just kind of, again, coming back to the terms to describe. We focused a lot on our memorizing skills, our studying skills, and to be able to get through this pandemic crisis, we're going to have to use both our intellectual skills and our emotional skills to come out of this intact. we also never in medical school, and this is really deficient, there was no time and no instruction about self-awareness or soft skills like conflict resolution, like the nonviolent communication. There was really nothing about empathy except, kind of how to show it to a patient, right? Nothing about mindfulness. I know that a lot of medical schools are working on this now and raising awareness of that, but really not developing those soft skills of like how to manage an office, right? How to lead a team. Those things were really sort of left to us, and it kind of cracks me up when I think about people who think, well, I got an MD, so I should be able to run this business. They're not the same skills, and it's kind of our arrogance and hubris that lets us even believe I'm going to be able to just sort of wing it because I'm smart. So this was interesting to me that high achievers, we believe that it's due to our intellect, right? But like there was this study that was done of 2,800 physicians that were star performers, and their success really was more related to their emotional intelligence than their technical competency, how good they were at doing their job. And I think we think about this a lot with like athletes, right? Like if you're thinking about Federer and Nadal, their success is not just because they have strong technical skills on the court. It's because they know what to do, like when they lost that last point, or how to get back up again, or how to show up when they lost their last 3 matches, or how to come back after the last point. It's all about that emotional piece. And that coaches in sports spend a lot of time working on the mental game, right? But I don't think physicians do it all. And it's just so ironic that we're then given all this responsibility, and kind of people trust that we know what we're doing. And I just feel like there's a lot missing in that structure, with not being aware of our own feelings and what we're doing with them. Even now, I'm like intellectualing about my emotional stuff, right? Like I can't even talk about emotions without being intellectual about it, because it's just such a habit. And so here's the thing: is like, do healthcare professionals have high emotional quotients? I think we would love to think that we do, and I think this group is highly selected for those who do, because we're here even curious about it, right? I'm sure we can all think of someone we know who doesn't have as much high emotional quotient. And so, this is the other thing, is that this would be the number of suicides that people are having in medicine would suggest that people don't have good coping skills. And this was from 2018, so that was 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, pre all of this. And I think it's really going to be like kind of a big question mark of how people are going to cope moving forward if we don't address our vulnerabilities. So these are some more reasons of why physicians need emotional intelligence training now. We've talked about burnout. Most of us have some targeted purpose in our coaching with helping with burnout. Some define it as emotional exhaustion. Others, have other, if you don't use the word emotion, then you have another thing of like, I've gone from being over functioning, like I can do everything, to like, I can't do anything. So going from over functioning to under functioning. Certainly we can relate to the pressures of being doctors, and we do have this underdeveloped emotional intelligence that I talked about previously, of how we've skewed where we've focused our attention and our time. We have a complex of being heroes, being the one who shows up and saves the day. People revere us. It's a lot of responsibility and it's stressful. And then this crushing identity crisis, I thought this was interesting, that because it's certainly been true for me, that around 40, people just kind of go like, WTF, like when is this going to end? I didn't sign up for this. I thought this was temporary. I thought that, how am I going to sustain this? So that's a huge call for like a wake up now, because I think people are kind of done, and now we're being called to be like even more capable. Old school training, like, oh, suck it up, I had to do it, you need to do it, eat your lunch in the elevator, we've got to get going. Just that kind of mentality that this is the way it is, you can't get off, like that kind of mentality is not helpful. And that's how most of us were trained, if I'm not mistaken, about our ages. And then environmental factors are things in the office space, like the EMR, you know, just technical factors like trying to deal with insurance and pre-authorization and just the layers and layers and layers of what's involved in our environment that's really stressful. Also, moods are contagious, like the physician really in an office, depending on your setting, but really sets the tone for like the entire office. So if you've got a leader who's pissed off, like everyone's kind of pissed off, right? And then if you have a leader who's like, we can do this, I'm with you, let's talk about it, that sets a different tone and a more welcoming tone and a tone that's people want to model. And then I think all of us have decision fatigue. Like sometimes just I feel exhausted before I've even gotten to work about all the decisions I've had to make. And then the day ends and you don't even know, like decision after decision after decision. I know that I wasn't even able to decide like what to eat for dinner because I just feel like, I don't know, someone else decide. So my belief is that the only way to heal is to feel. You know, there's all these things we're doing now talking about self-care and ways that we do things like focus on nutrition, exercise, meditation, and all of these are so important. But I don't think they're going to really address the bottom line issue, which is like how we're really feeling, because nobody's talking about that. And so, you know, I've been doing a lot of feeling about our feelings, and we all have feelings about our feelings, which is called meta emotion. You know, we've heard of metacognition, like thinking about our thinking. And this is feeling, like how we feel about how we feel. And so, you know, Stacy brought up shame earlier, and I'm going to be leading into that in a second, because we all have feelings. We have a lot of shame about our feelings. It's like, it's not okay to feel. And maybe depending, it doesn't matter even how you grew up, what was okay in the household of origin about how you felt. Once you enter your life as a physician or even medical training, like it was very clear what feelings you could express and what feelings you could not express. Let me catch up here. I didn't label my slides very well, but I think the other thing is that we feel like it's okay to feel good. It's always okay to feel good. It's okay to be in a good mood because it's socially acceptable. But we can't selectively numb. We can't just be like, I'm only going to feel good. I'm going to do all these things that are going to feel good, and then I'm going to feel good, and I'm going to think about good thoughts, and I'm going to feel good because I want to feel good. And it's not just accepting that half of life feels good and half of life doesn't feel good. It's kind of our relationship with our feelings. And feelings are also not just intellectual, they're physiological. So we have these bodies that are on a cellular level, have experienced adverse consequences of cortisol and, you know, adrenaline and all the stuff even in our genetics of what was passed on or what genes have been turned on and off under our circumstances that are not really just a matter of, let me just think my way out of feeling this way. So worst case scenarios. I bring this up because I have a friend, Nicole, who is an OBGYN, and we've been friends for a really long time, since medical school, and she and all of us, I think, are familiar with, let's imagine the worst case scenario. Like if I can tolerate the worst case scenario, then I'll be okay. So I'll start with the worst case scenario of, like, you know, somebody dies from COVID. Like that is a really bad thing. And if we can imagine how we would cope with that, and if we can imagine what we would do in that circumstance and who we would talk to and how we would negotiate that, and we have a plan, then we can kind of cope, because we've learned to master how we're going to cope in the worst case scenario. And then everything less than that seems easy. That's kind of a default setting. So the reason that I bring that up is because I want to start with shame, because that's like the worst emotion. And if we can learn how to cope with shame, then like all the other emotions are just way easier, or relatively easier. And so shame is that feeling of, it's like the master of undesired emotions. And briefly to talk about the differences between shame, guilt, embarrassment, and humiliation. You know, guilt is like, I did something bad. humiliation is being called out for something that someone said you did, but you didn't do it, like you're stupid, and you know you're not stupid. So there's like conflict between what you've been accused of being and what you know to be true. So you feel like defending yourself, like, hey, now that was so out of line. That is so not true. I feel humiliated by you saying I'm stupid when I prepared for this, and just because you didn't agree with it, now you're humiliating me. Embarrassment tends to be something that we can feel and kind of laugh about later, like coming out of the bathroom with, toilet paper hanging out the back of your pants. I mean, it's something that people can be like, oh my gosh, it was so embarrassing. But then in the end, it's a common thing. Everybody can relate to that and kind of laugh about it. So it's a more lighthearted. But shame is really the belief that, I am bad. Like, I am not worthy of love and belonging. I have done something so bad that I'm not included anymore. I am not allowed to be here. I can't, just shrinking up. And it's a very physiological experience of, like, some people say, sweating, nausea. It's very unique how we each experience shame. So I'm not going to pretend to be able to identify everyone's experience of it. But most of us have pretty early experiences of that, of like that overwhelming feeling of, oh no, this is bad. I'm bad. And whether it originated in childhood or whether it originated in medical training, it's penetrating. And for me, I know that I experienced shame in medical training when I did my first biochem exam and I got a B- because I had always gotten A's and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I thought, med school has just started. I'm a month in. I've gotten a B-. Holy shit, this is getting real. How can I possibly be like average in this class? And it just went from there, right? And then I remember too, and I've shared this with some of you, the story of like being in this small group my first year in medical school, where we were all encouraged to talk about our feelings and how we were adjusting to medical school. And my small group was led by a beloved psychiatrist in the hospital, and everyone admired him, and we would share our feelings in these small groups. And then at the end of the year, we got our evaluations back. He wrote on my evaluation, seemed younger than the rest of the class, because I would cry in those sessions. I would express like how I was really feeling. I mean, I'll be honest, like I've never had trouble being vulnerable. It's just in my DNA, and people who know me know that. But I will say that I have really been penalized for being vulnerable and showing my true self and my feelings in my medical career. And it's a big part of why I left that scenario, because I wasn't willing to tolerate it anymore. And now I have a better relationship with it. But the point is, we've all felt it, and it's a universal emotion. So the notion of I'm going to just stop feeling shame, or I'm going to do everything I can to avoid shame, is not a realistic approach. So, one of the things is, this is, again, just to sum it up, shame is the never good enough emotion. Like, no matter what I do, I'm not good enough. And it's this feeling of being unworthy of love or belonging. And the way that we avoid unwanted feelings, so I'm saying unwanted now, shame being the ultimate, the penultimate worst, but anything we don't want to feel, we numb or deflect it, blame it on someone else, shame and blame, right? Offload the hurt onto someone else, or please others, seek to please and make sure that we don't let anybody out, because that's a way to be like, I feel this, but I don't want you to know it, so I'm going to act like I'm fine, but I'm really not. Perfectionism is a big one for many of us. And again, this thing about, we do self-care because we don't want to feel it. So maybe we'll spend a day exercising, or we'll practice meditation. We'll take care of ourselves. We'll do a self-care day. And I'm not just talking about the massage and pedicure way. I'm talking about really effective ways to deal with our unwanted feelings and manage them. But in the end, it's kind of like, it's temporary, right? Those things are temporary. If you're going to do that, it's a way to cope, but it's not really healing. It's just kind of getting through the moment to the next moment. Without going into a lot of all the details, we're big into numbing, right? Like anything we do to not feel is things like distraction, stuffing, the feeling. You know, I'm going to watch Netflix. I'm going to have a glass of wine. I'm going to have 5 glasses of wine. I'm going to go shopping, talk to someone else, pretend it's not happening. You know, there's a million ways that we numb. And it's, again, these aren't bad things. There just can't be like permanent fixes. So I put this slide in there because for me, this was like my way of coping with bad feelings. Like when I felt ashamed was just to continue to try to please and perform to perfect and just work harder and be sure that like that just went on forever and ever. And if I made a mistake, God forbid, then I needed to be more perfect and I needed to try harder and I needed to please more people or please the right people or perform in a different way or try to understand their way so that I could do their way so that everyone would be happy and I would feel okay about myself. And so I think that a lot of people with this, even, you know, even that thing back to, I want to just go back to even what feelings are okay. I mean, one of the things is even grief. People are more comfortable saying I'm in grief than I'm in shame, because grief is more socially acceptable. We can talk about that. We can say, oh yeah, grief is hard, but people don't want to say I'm in shame because I'd rather be at home with my kids than go into work right now. You know, there's a lot of built-in feelings about how we should be feeling that keep us from really feeling what we're feeling. And so then we're left with this kind of scenario, this person, this person who's got the helmet on, who's like tied up and kind of ready to go, secure, and yet like super scary. How are you going to get to the other side? And this is about courage and about that kind of sweaty feeling, right? This is like the perfect embodiment of terror and feeling it all, and then, but you still want to make it to the other side. Sorry. So one of the things that I've been kind of leading up to is that we have to build shame or emotional resilience. And it's not just about the things like how I'm going to keep showing up even when I don't feel like it. It's getting to know and be familiar with what are the things that trigger these feelings of inadequacy in me and realizing that they're normal, and then being able to reach out to others and talk about how we feel and to ask for help. And a lot of people, these are really difficult. It's really difficult. I can't believe how difficult it is for people to ask for help. There's this whole complex, because I've never struggled with that, because anyone who knows me, I ask for help all the time. But it's so clear to me that even that is like annoying to people, you know, because they're trying to suck it up and do it without needing help. And so there's a lot of shame even in needing to ask for help. And talking about how we feel. And I put a little asterisk about this, that all of this is only safe with someone who has earned the right to hear our story and be empathetic. So all of us in the Physician Coaching Alliance, you know, recognize the importance of this. And I think it's then kind of like reaching a tipping point where you can kind of have this be cultural and accepted on a broader scale than just the individual. But to need to break that cycle of please perform perfect. This is really exciting to me. So I've ordered this book. I haven't received it yet, but Marc Brackett is a researcher at Yale, in the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, talking about this new concept. He has a new book called Permission to Feel. And this is his kind of rubric for how to manage emotion. And it's ruler. So to recognize emotions in ourselves and others, and understand the causes and the consequences of those emotions, to label those emotions accurately, like use the right word and vocabulary, and express those emotions appropriately, and then regulate the emotions. So I watched him in a talk recently, and everyone wants to just regulate the emotions effectively. Like everyone wants to just jump to the bottom line of like, yeah, but how do I want to show up right now? Like what's okay? What's going to be okay, not just for me, but like for everyone around me, so that I don't risk being ostracized by my community. And so I'm really going to I'm excited to read this book and also to see some of the methodology for how to incorporate this institutionally, but then first and foremost, just individually, because I think that's where we all struggle the most, is like, we've got to live with ourselves every day. And we're often our worst critic and our worst companion. And so empathy is where this comes in again as an antidote to shame or really any undesired emotion. And I know those of you who work with empathy are familiar with the definition, but it's really about um, feeling with others without trying to fix it or trying to brush it aside or make light of it or um, compare it to like, well, you think you're feeling bad, I'm feeling this is why I'm feeling bad, or I know how you feel because I felt this. Doesn't, we don't have to have lost someone from COVID to know what that would feel like, right? It's being able to sit with, or we don't have to be in the exact circumstance as the client or the person that we're sharing with or sitting with to be able to sit with them in their discomfort and withhold judgment and just hold space to be able to have those feelings and ride them out. So this is, we've all heard of the Me Too movement, and these words, Me Too, are the two most powerful words you can use to show empathy. And again, it's not just about, oh, I've experienced that also. This was from Tarana Burke, who started the Me Too movement with Harvey Weinstein. And it's gained momentum, and because there was strength in numbers, and it reached a tipping point where it really caught on. And again, you don't have to necessarily have been harassed to be able to say, I know how that would feel, to be able to express empathy for all the people who have gone through that. Doesn't necessarily mean that you were in those exact same circumstances and had the exact same emotional experience, but you're willing to sit with the emotional experience of those with others, bear witness to it, hold it, and share it, endure it. And so when empathy being the antidote to shame, it's not just about, it's really the shared experience because we're so much wired for connection with others. But I do want to say the importance of self-compassion, because if you don't have someone else to sit with you and go through this with, the best thing you can do is advocate for yourself to yourself. And this is a whole nother topic. Like, I've touched on so many topics today that are so big and so huge, and none of them to be minimized. But I really like this idea of being able to be kinder to ourselves first and foremost, so that we make ourselves a higher priority as we're trying to cope with what's happening, and not just be defaulting to what the institution wants us to do, but what's okay for us to do, and how we're going to show up and be brave with ourselves and our own feelings. And maybe it won't be popular, and it won't be welcomed, and it might be shaming, and know that we can all call upon and sit with others who have earned the right to hear our stories and that we feel safe with. And I know all of us here at the Physicians Coaching Alliance are willing to do that and are highly capable of doing that. And I think if you don't have that person in your life, we are here for you. And we also, I know that everyone can sort of hopefully think of somebody that will hold space with them. And if you don't, and it's so important to reach out. So here we are back at vulnerability. I know you're thinking, how did we get away from this? Why are we now talking about it again? Have we been talking about vulnerability? Yes, we've been talking about it the whole time with different scenarios and anecdotes. And the reason I bring it back here is that in order to do all of this wrestling with our emotions, it's going to require vulnerability, like first and foremost, to survive this time of uncertainty, like unprecedented uncertainty, and all the risk of doing it wrong, not doing it right, not knowing what we're doing, and being able to experience all of it, like without doing it right, and being able to reroute and apologize and revisit and share and sit with and do sort of figure it outable. Like, I'm loving that phrase, it's figure outable, because it is, it's all figure outable if we can be in it together. And that requires trust that we build in small increments over time to be able to be our true selves with one another. So this quote I love. It's from Braving the Wilderness. True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. true belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And you are not alone. I don't know if anybody's there. Can you talk to me?
I'll just
I
shout out
can't,
right
I
now.
can't hear anybody.
That was beautiful. That was really beautiful.
You can stop
I don't-
recording. Or stop recording.
I don't know if Erin is on the call. I didn't see her, but I thought you were masterfully holding the silence. I was just allowing for that because that moment after required me to just, there's a lot to sit with there. There's a lot of good, beautiful stuff to sit with there. And what you said that, you know, we got to, I can't remember what the topic was, but you said it could be a talk in itself. Each of those slides could have been a talk in itself. I mean, there's so much packed in there that's so important and so meaningful. So,
believe me, I struggled with that. It was really hard to get to whittle it down. It's just a lot, but all of it's learnable. That's the other thing. All of it's learnable.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, Stacy, go for it.
Yeah. Normally I like speak right away, but I feel so raw right now after listening to your talk. I do, because you just brought up so many of my deeper emotions or so many of my experiences that I kind of even just need to process all of it. But I do want to say that you were outstanding and your talk was outstanding and very meaningful and very poignant right now. And it just touched in me some things that are going on. You know, even I had spoken with Kara about coaching somebody, and somebody just asked me to coach them, so I'm coaching him. And you know, immediately I thought of everything I did wrong after our first, check session, and right away thinking, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm still in training, and and all the thoughts and the shame, and I wasn't even able to catch it right away that this was just vulnerability. Like I believed it. I believed all of it. And then I was ready to just quit. It takes a while to have that emotional, what did you say? The meta emotions? I love that.
Yeah, the feelings about our feelings.
Yes, but it takes a consciousness to be aware of the feelings we're having about our feelings. And that's such a skill. I've never thought of meta emotion. I'm really going to give that thought because it just feels so real in the moment that you believe it rather than just a thought about my feelings. You think it's a real reaction to my feelings, So you just brought up so much great stuff, Tracy. Thank you.
Well, it's a lot. I know it's a lot.
So where would you say that we should start, right? Like we're curious about vulnerability, but it still sounds like really scary, or we're having experiences and emotions that we don't know how to process. Like what's the next step, the next bite that we need to take in order to move forward?
Well, I think it's really about being curious about it. I mean, it's really about just what Stacy said, like the awareness of any of it, right? Like not even being aware that we're having some emotions right now. I mean, it's coming out in really weird ways. Like when we don't call it what it is, it comes out in weird ways, like aggression toward our kids or totally unrelated ways that don't have anything to do with the circumstance. And so I think it's curiosity, like being noticing. It's a lot. Like it's about this thing about raising it to consciousness. It's about being whoa. It kind of is that whole thing in the same way with metacognition. Like, what am I thinking? Why am I thinking this way? It's really got to be sort of a third person observer, like a curiosity of wow, I just acted that way. Like, where was that coming from? And again, getting really familiar with the vocabulary that, I mean, I still struggle with. Like, am I feeling sad, in any kind of circumstance, like stress? People say I'm feeling stressed. And people kind of say, oh, I know what that is. But maybe it's really like overwhelm. Maybe it's not stress at all. So like we talked about that the other day, Kara, like maybe it's, I think I'm really stressed. And so I'm going to do things like really schedule time in my day to do these things that are going to de-stress me. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to sit down and be mindful when I'm chewing. I'm going to just be in this moment. I'm going to do all this. And in the end of the day, like with all the other things you're trying to do, you're really not feeling stressed. You're feeling like overwhelmed, and some things need to go. Some things need to be checked off. And so I think when we say global words like I'm stressed, it's important to get more granular with it. Like, and I really don't like that word granular. It's just overused so much, but I'm just using it right now to say, like, get more nitty gritty about it, like more curious. And I think it has to come with education about, and that's what that book, Permission to Feel, is going to be talking about. And there's certainly lots and lots of other resources than that. But being able to say, like, do I feel sad? Do I feel worried? Do I feel confused? Or, and all those, grief is a huge one. And grief is in itself is a huge concept. That's not just one feeling, so many feelings. What do I need? Do I need forgiveness? Do I need permission? Do I need skills? Do I need a hug? Like, what do I need? Do I need someone to say something to make me feel better? You know, it's just a lot. I don't know if that answered your question, Kara.
I have a question. You know, one thing I have found incredibly helpful for me is to get into physicality over my brain, like to deal with emotions, to just get into my body of where do I sense that emotion? You know, what physical sensations am I experiencing? Is that any part of your work, Tracy, and any part of Brené's work, to get out of thought and into physical body as a way to experience and move through emotions?
Absolutely. It's not a huge part of Brené's work, but it's certainly a part of lots of other schools of thought. I mean, we talk about the physiology of shame, like, you know, how it shows up in the body. Is it in your stomach? Where do you feel it? And certainly, you know, we've talked with Melissa Hankins about EFT, like all these techniques to tap into the body's experience of emotion that are so helpful. And I think that the holistic psychologist, who I just adore, is really talking about the nervous system and the way that we've adapted to and have these conditioned responses in our body to how we deal with emotion. There's a lot, I'm sure, Libby, you can suggest about that too, about these properties within the body, and tuning into the body is huge. And I think that that's actually a skill in itself, right? Because that requires really tuning into, my stomach's upset. What does that mean? Is that like an illness? Is that a feeling? Is it because I ate something that wasn't okay? It's just a lot of recognition. It's a lot of thinking about and noticing. All of this is a lot about noticing things that we're not usually focused on. It's kind of be like a conscious decision to choose to make it a priority. Recognizing that it's important, I guess, be a first step.
Thank you.
I put in that list for feelings. Just when I started doing NVC, I was like, I got 2. Like, I'm good or bad, you know? And it's like kind of what you're saying about the granularity of it. Like, look, NVC is for nonviolent communication, and that little link is just to give vocabulary for it. And like what you're saying is, I feel sick, you know, what is that? And the feelings, what you're saying, also your physiologic feelings and your sensations, because that's like your deeper emotions, which can arise like immediately before you even get it in your neocortex. So I think it's so important to know your, feelings in your body also, because they're so related. I don't think that can be overstated.
No, and actually, Stacy, I did read something interesting recently, which is that like actually the cognitive, like the neocortex is actually like the slowest part of the brain. So like the body and the primitive brain, like the your reptilian brain is so much faster. So much faster. Like, you sense danger before you think that's dangerous. Before you do any thinking. And that's kind of why I mean there's different a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and a lot of like the life coach school and Byron Katie, like a lot of people's strategy is about, there's a circumstance and then you have a thought about the circumstance and then that leads to a feeling and then you recognize the feeling and your feeling leads to your action and then your actions lead to a result. And that is a great emotional regulation and management tool. No question. No question. But I do think that some other things do precede thought. And I think it's really hard to just, it's a great tool for emotional management to be able to go straight to, I'm going to choose how I want to think and I'm going to choose how I want to feel right now. So I'm going to think I'm going to choose to feel this way and then I'm going to feel this way. But I think there's so much to what you were saying, Stacy and Libby, so much that precedes cognition that is just, you can't skip that part.
Stacy, I wanted to throw out there and I know I don't want to get too far off of Tracy, what you were talking about, but I just wanted to say, so Amanda Blake does a lot of work in this area. She talks a lot about embodied awareness and talks a lot about the body being the emotional sense organ of the brain. The body's job is to tell what the environment around what's going on around you, what's it feeling, but also your internal sensations. What are those environments looking like, and then giving information to the brain so the brain can make some guesses about how it should respond in situations. And so I completely agree with you that there's so much. She talks about the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the lived experience self, and that there's a wisdom of the body that sends information to the brain that often leads to our emotional reactions. But if we can understand those sensations and that we can get control over those sensations, then our brain can more accurately understand what the body is experiencing and be able to make decisions in a way that's more useful for the body. So I just wanted to add on to what Tracy and Libby were saying, but I completely agree with your thoughts about how to guide people to tapping into the wisdom of the body that's built in.
Yeah, and there's the books too. I forget, what is it? The Body Never Forgets, or the Body, is that what it's called?
There's a bunch. There's a whole huge area
about trauma. And that's the whole thing too, is this whole, people are really talking about trauma more, that it's not just trauma with a capital T. It's trauma with the lowercase t, which is just basically like anything that felt bad that didn't get resolved.
Yeah.
That has a lasting impact. That is trauma. And it doesn't have to be something that others feel should be. But again, it's this whole thing about how we should feel about our feelings. Oh, that doesn't sound traumatic to me. Well, that's because it wasn't you, and you didn't feel the way I felt about it. Well, it's 10 after 7, and I know it's that time of day for everyone. So I'm gonna sign off. I can't thank you enough for just sharing this time with me, this community. Just being able to talk about some of this stuff. is really healing for me personally, because like I said, I have a lot of shame about being me, being too much, feeling, I never had trouble with the vulnerability part. I really never did. But I have a lot of problems with a lot of residual with being shamed for how I felt and then not knowing what to do with that. And so that's become really important for me to hopefully make a difference in. Because I have other gifts I can give. I have other gifts than being a radiologist. I'm tired of seeing the world in black and white. Doesn't work. Too much gray.
Thank you so much. This is really awesome. I know that everyone got a lot out of it.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so much, Tracy. Thank you. It was so nice meeting you. Delighted now. Tracy,
Thanks to all of you who came and are muted. Appreciate your holding space with us.
Thank you, Tracy.
Good night.
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.